Such a great topic, not one that everybody likes to hear about, but if you have livestock, you know it's going to happen eventually. Something is going to die. So we don't like that, but it happens. After the winter we've had, probably quite a few of you have maybe experienced more death loss. And so we got to figure out what to do with these. And there's lots of ways to take care of dead animal bodies, but there are lots of laws about this as well. So we'll talk about that too tonight. So thanks for attending. This is our third Zoom meeting in this series. And if you want to contact me later, there's my information and we'll have it at the end as well. But thanks for coming tonight. And I know this is a hard topic for some people, but you don't need to be causing a nuisance to your neighbors by leaving dead animal bodies on the back side of your property. And I recently experienced a Facebook post from, I don't know, it's a small ruminant page, or maybe it was just small ruminants or hair sheep. I can't remember which group it was in, but anyway, somebody asked after they had a dead animal, what does everyone do with their dead animal carcasses? So it was quite a lively discussion, and probably about 60 to 75% of the responses were, we just leave it on the back of the property to rot and leave it out there for coyote bait. Well, you can get in a lot of trouble for that if somebody complains. So with that, we're going to go on. And there are laws about this. So there's a lot here to read, but I will read that to you. Every person owning or caring for any animal that has died from any cause shall dispose of the animal carcass within 24 hours after knowledge of such death, either by arranging for a person permitted under this chapter to dispose of or transport it, or by the owner or person entitled to such body, causing the same to be deposited in a permitted sanitary landfill, notwithstanding any other provision of the law or rule to the contrary, allowing it to be buried in a sanitary landfill, or buried, incinerated, composted, or disposed of in a manner approved by the state veterinarian within the 24-hour period upon his own or any other available premises, provided that such disposition is in accordance with the provisions of subsection 2 of this section. So all that being said, there's a lot to this law. So now if you're in another state, and I know that several of you are, you should pick out your favorite search engine, and then you'll type in dead animal disposal and then the name of your state. And then you should come up with several laws and rules pertaining to that. Plus, you'll probably get quite a list of universities who have done lots of research on mortality composting. And that's another way to look it up, mortality composting your state. So what are we really worried about when an animal dies? If we just leave it out on top of the soil and we just let it out, leave it out there for coyote bait, we're worried about water contamination, soil contamination, livestock contamination, and wildlife contamination. So it's not so much the rotting flesh that is the problem as is the intestines, where we could get E. coli contamination. So as the carcass decomposes, you're going to have more problems with the actual intestines and E. coli for any surface water that might be contaminated. And if there's a disease in the carcass, you could contaminate your soil forever, because now those diseases and prions and whatever else comes out of a disease could stay in your soil for quite a long time if it's that type of a disease that comes from soil. You could also contaminate the rest of your livestock on your farm because they may come in contact it if they get loose and get to the back 40. Wildlife will carry off pieces and parts. I mean, it all sounds good to let the coyotes have a meal, but they are spreading that carcass all over the place as they eat, as well as rodents. And you might be bringing in other problems, as we see in the other problems list. You can spread disease. You can get runoff liquids with E. coli mixed in, and E. coli is traceable, in case you didn't know, through the water system. But you could also be bringing in vultures, other wildlife, domestic dogs. You could have a lot of disturbance from that. And with all this contamination, if somebody smells a rotting carcass, they can report you as a nuisance. Plus, you also want to think about that if there's a flyover, if somebody has a drone or a helicopter and sees a lot of rotting carcasses out on your property, they can report you as a nuisance. So those are all things that you want to think about. The dead animal disposal law in Missouri began in the 1940s, but it was updated in 1992 when we started getting lots of CAFOs, you know, large animal holding facilities and rearing facilities. And then they also added poultry and turkeys in 1995 because we started seeing a lot more of those confinement systems in Missouri. The governing agencies that regulate dead animal disposal is Missouri Department of Natural Resources in their solid waste management program. And I was on a Region F committee for a while in Missouri, and that is quite an eye-opening experience. Solid waste is a lot of things, and carcasses is one of them. Also, the Missouri Department of Agriculture's Division of Animal Health. So that involves the state veterinarian. And this will be true in your states as well if you're not from Missouri. Current law requires, I'm gonna move this, that the body of an animal that has died be properly disposed of within 24 hours after knowledge of the death. So if you really didn't know about it, well, that's on you, but you know, until you know about it, you still have 24 hours to solve the problem. Disposal methods acceptable to DNR are rendering facilities, composting, sanitary landfill, incineration, and on-site burial. And in Missouri, I checked, there is still only one rendering plant left, and that's in Joplin. So if you're not near that, they're not going to send out a truck to haul off your animal carcasses. So that's going to be a problem. You can't really use that unless you're within probably less than 50 miles of that facility. Composting is probably the next most appreciated by the state. Sanitary landfill, you can do that if they will accept it. A lot of times in a sanitary landfill, they have rules and laws that they know how to dispose of them, and it's okay with the state that you take it to a sanitary landfill, but the operator and the owner of the landfill may have their own rules about that, and they may not accept carcasses. So especially of larger animals from sheep and pigs on up to cows and horses. Incineration, there's special laws for incineration. So you can incinerate them, and that does not mean you can pour gasoline on the carcass and light it. That is open air burning. That is not incineration. So the problem with that is if you are a facility who accepts animals for incineration, you have special laws that you have to follow. And most of those are for, they will receive the animal on their terms, but if their facility can incinerate over 100 pounds within an hour, then they have to live over distancing laws. They can't be in too close to a town. They can't be too close to hospitals or other institutions. You could have your own incineration facility, but unless you want to live under those laws of incineration, you have to have something that can only take less than 100 pounds per hour. So that's still going to be some manipulation. If most of your carcasses are 100 pounds or more, you're going to have to probably cut them up in order to fit them in. So that seems to me like a lot of a big process to try and carry that off. And then for on-site burial, there's a whole nother set of laws and rules for that. And I'll give you lots of resources toward the end here so that you can find those if you do want to do on-site burial. But the rules in Missouri are that you can only have so many pounds per acre per year on your property, and no more than 1/10 of your property can be used for that purpose. So they even break it down into how many carcasses that you're allowed and things like that. So, and you're not supposed to get it too close to water, usually within 100 feet of water of any kind. So we don't want to contaminate our water sources. The DNR Water Pollution Control Program protects the quality of the groundwater and surface water supplies of the state by regulating the disposal of wastewater pollutants. And all that information came from an extension guide WQ216 from Charles Fullage of the Department of Ag Engineering at MU. Now, Cornell has a really nice infographic which will tell you how to properly compost. It talks about the location of your mortality composting site. It talks about how to do it and how many layers and things you have to have, how much compost material, all your carbons that you have to mix with your nitrogen source to get it to compost within a certain amount of time and at a certain temperature. So it's a really good guide, and I have the link for that in my resources for you. And if you do composting properly, you should be able to have it composted down to just bones and maybe some hair at about 150 days if you do it properly. Here again is a reminder about water. If you're composting, if you're near a river, you cannot compost any closer than 200 feet out. Should always stay about 200 feet out from your well or a pond. So any water source must be protected by being at least 200 feet away from it. So there's lots and lots of ways to do composting. And most of them involve building a structure and having lots of nitrogen sources like wood chips and hay and manure, any barn clean out you might have. But they'd use the turning method. So you would start in one bin, and you can use different kinds of materials, and I'll have some pictures of that in a minute. You can use, you put it all in the first bin, you put down a layer of 18 to 20 inches of your either wood chips, wood shavings. If you have barn clean out, such as rotted manure and rotted hay and straw, then that can be your base layer. And then you need about 20 inches to get started. 18 to 20 inches is preferable. And then you lay your carcass on that. And since they're ruminants, we need to worry about that rumen gas building up. So we need to puncture the rumen so that because the microbes are still alive in there for 2 to 3 days after the animal dies. And that's why you get such a bloating of the carcass. So we want to be careful to slice that rumen or puncture it. And remember, the rumen's lunch is on the left, so the rumen is on the left side of the animal. And you'll want to puncture that, and that allows an exchange of air and lets the gas out and lets the microbes slow down their work of the rumen. So then we would bury that with a good 12 inches all the way around the carcass, plus another 12 inches or 18 inches over the top. And you're going to want to mound it and pack it after you add water to get the right microbes started in there so they can start decomposing. Plus, this all helps contain the smell. And this is what I do with mine. So I have a bin, and my bin is a 1-step bin. So you can do it, but really the preferred method is a 3-step where you would turn it after so many months and then dump more of your nitrogen source in there to keep the compost working. So you can use a 1-step method, but moving compost from primary to secondary bins provides mixing. It adds oxygen. It allows the compost to finish off with a high degree of breakdown. So that's why they turn it, because it has to have 3 days at 131 degrees Fahrenheit to kill all any diseases or pathogens that might be in there. And then it will start cooling off. So you should see steam coming out as it is, the compost is working. Some producers have reported acceptable results with a 1-step composting system. It generally takes longer than primary and secondary composting. And also, bin volume requirements are not reduced by 1-step composting. So what that means is you still have to have a lot of wood chips and barn clean out, old straw, rotted straw and manure, and rotten hay, anything like that that you can add. So you still have to have the right size. You still have to have that amount of material around it to compost properly. So what is mortality composting? I've been telling you the wrong thing. I've been saying nitrogen instead of carbon. So sorry about that. Nitrogen source is the carcass. So that's your green. And then your carbon source is wood shavings, straw, old hay, and other sources. And then you need water. So nitrogen is the carcass. Carbon is your wood and your straw, wood shavings, old hay, other resources. Sorry about that. I'm a little nervous tonight. So here's what it would look like in this carcass spacing in a compost pile. So they show an 18-inch base there. So that's 18 inches deep. And then you can lay your carcasses on there, and you want to leave space between the carcasses. So that's a 12-inch minimum of the carcass body, any part of the body, from the edge of your pile. If you start from the bottom and work your way up there, you'll see that they have a 12 inches around the animal. And then if you have more than one animal in that same layer, you're going to want to leave a space there of 8 to 10 inches. So there's more carbon material down in between those bodies. Because there's going to be liquid breakdown, and we need to have that soaked up so we don't get any leachate on the ground. We don't want this to run off into our water source. So we want all this carbon mass to soak all that up. So then as this breaks down, your pile will shrink, and you can always add on to the top of the pile so that you just put another nice layer of 8 to 10 inches over those first layer carcasses, and then you can add another carcass or two, as long as you have that 12 inches all the way around the carcass, and then an 18-inch cover layer. And if you mound it up, sorry, my dog wants in. If you mound it up properly on top, then it will not let in as much rain. You do need water in there, but you don't want water to rain through it. And like when we have these 3 and 4 inch rain events, that basically could ruin your pile if you don't have it mounded up properly. That was supposed to go with that, so apparently I skipped a slide. That photo, this photo right here, was courtesy of Lincoln University in Oklahoma. And here's a real simple one. You can use pallets and T-posts. You just circle them around there and wire them together and make your pile in the middle. This will keep the bigger critters out. Here's another one. We actually did a training down at Langston University some years ago, and they had this pile sitting out there. You can make your fence with old hay bales and then start your layers in between that. And this one is basically how I do it. I started out with a couple of pieces of stock panel and had them wired together, and I started my layers this way. And for a while you can open that wire up, but after you get about halfway up, you'll probably need to leave it attached and not open that any further, and you'll just have to lift over the carcass over the top and keep adding more and more carbon material. And the orange circles that you see in there, those are thermometers to check and see if the compost is working correctly. And it needs to get up between 130 to 140 degrees for an extended amount of time, which is generally, depending upon what kind of composting you do, it should be within 3 days. And here's how you can judge how much carbon source you're going to need. For a 100-pound mortality, you're going to need about 100 cubic feet of your carbon source. So that is about 4 to 5 tractor buckets full. That seems like a lot, but we're trying to capture anything that might spill out of that carcass. So you kind of have to be careful. And the good thing about this is you can keep adding on to the pile. And as long as you have enough there, it will continue to work until you have a finished compost. And you are allowed to use this on production fields, any kind of agricultural field. It's probably not a good idea to use it for vegetables if you're going to use your compost for vegetable growing, because unless you get it tested, you don't know what pathogens are in there. Hopefully, if you can guarantee that your temperature stayed up for the right amount of time, it will have taken care of all those pathogens. But they just, it's just recommended that you don't use it for vegetable production. And this photo was also from Langston. And here's all the things that can go wrong. This is a great infographic on this, I thought, because it tells you how to troubleshoot it. So if your temperature never comes up to the proper degree, then you need to adjust your pile moisture. Sometimes you just need some more water in it. If the odor is bad, then you need to add more carbon, which is wood chips or old rotten hay, anything like that. If it's too wet, it will cause an odor as well. Excuse me. If you see liquid leaking out from your pile, then your base layer is probably too thin or your compost got too wet, and you may require reconstruction. So, you know, it's going to be kind of a mess, but you may have to add a lot more. You may have to get in there and possibly rearrange what you have. Now, if your carcass doesn't break down, it's a failure to decompose, then you don't have the right amount of carbon to nitrogen ratio. And you might need to add carbon source and ensure that you have the proper pile construction. If you have lots of insects flying around, occasionally I'm in a hurry and I don't do a thick enough cover over the top. The next day, if I go over there and check it, there'll be lots of flies coming around. So you need to sometimes add some more carbon and make sure your pile is constructed properly. Also, you might see vultures. The vultures are flying right over your pile. They can smell it, so they're looking for a food resource, so you might not want to leave it like that. Sorry about that. So in Missouri, dead animal carcasses should not be buried, burned, cooked, or otherwise disposed, except as provided in the dead animal regulations. If the animal did not die of a contagious disease, the owner may remove the hide before disposing of the carcass properly, but you're not allowed to create a nuisance with that too. If the owner or the person responsible for the dead animal is absent, unwilling, or unable to dispose of the animal properly, the state veterinarian determines that the dead animal is a health risk or a nuisance, and the veterinarian may enter the premises, take possession, and dispose of the animal. And the owner or the person responsible for the dead animal must reimburse the state veterinarian for reasonable expenses. So if somebody calls and reports you as a nuisance and you don't take care of it, this is what will happen. And large animals' deaths may occur. So if your whole flock catches a disease and you have die-off, or some kind of an outbreak, and there is disease eradication and a control program that the state veterinarian has to manage, then that may be beyond the scope of the methods outlined in the regulations. So in such a case, the state veterinarian, with the assistance of DNR, will develop an emergency plan for proper management of the large-scale death loss. Now, anytime you've heard of some of the swine diseases and the poultry diseases, that's when the state veterinarian steps in and they will tell you what you will be doing with those carcasses. And they'll help you, but you know, it's going to be quite an ordeal. If there's a death loss anticipated or experienced, then, and you're not sure if it's a disease, then you should call the state veterinarian's office in Jeff City, and they're there to help you. And if you don't know, they will send someone out, or they will ask you to take a sample and send it in. But just be aware that this is for the safety of everyone, and they are there to help you, so they could talk you through it and help you figure out a way to take care of this death loss. I have quite a few resources there. There's like 3 pages of resources, and you'll be able to get those, and I included them on the handout. there's a couple of YouTube videos in there, and that kind of give you the really quick version. And I know one of these YouTube videos is like an hour long. So they will give you lots and lots of information on how to do everything. Some states do not allow composting because of their soil. So be sure you check and know what your state will allow. So what questions do we have, Patrick?
I don't have any questions in the chat, so I guess we'll just open it up for questions.
And we went through that pretty fast, mostly on the law, but this slide usually provokes people to have questions, I would think, because you need to do it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Have you got? You can open up your mics and talk about it. Somebody's running water. So there's lots of things that you can look at. Your carbon, wood chips, your carbon could be rotted straw, rotted hay. I usually save the last couple of bales that I don't feed for composting. And I just take them over by my composting area and leave them there so they continue to kind of break down. And then that wet hay and straw can be just thrown right over the top of the carcass and help it break down. This slide I thought helps a lot. If you're troubleshooting your pile and it's not working very well, you might want to refer to this.
Eric did mention something in the chat about, well, he's been composting for a while. And you definitely know when you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
When you do.
Yeah. Yeah, usually I have a dog that just, if I don't lock her up and not let her see me put something in there, she's in there the next day. And she's always a mess. But of course, she's training my other dog to do the same. So that's even worse because he's smaller and he can jump higher, so he can bring it out for her. But yeah, I noticed a couple weeks ago, I had some vultures that just kept dipping down right over me. And I'm like, what is going on? And I went back over to the pile and need some more hay on top of that.
Susan, I have a question.
Sure.
So how do you know when the composting is complete, or do you just keep throwing stuff on the pile and covering it with hay, and I'm sure it settles down, and as it decomposes, the stack gets smaller. So is there any reason to ever evaluate it, or do you just keep throwing stuff over the fence and put hay on it?
Well, I guess it's, what are your goals? Do you have land to apply it to, like for crop ground? If you have crop ground, that's the best thing, or pastures even. You can put it back out on pastures. So if you have a reason to use it, which of course it's a good source for compost, so you can let it keep decomposing. If you get quite a few carcasses in there, you might want to open it up after 150 days and see if they've gone down. You'll know it's decomposing because the pile gets shorter, the stack gets shorter and shorter. And so you can, if you want to start a new pile, if you're turning it, you can leave 50% of the completed compost there, which will help you have all the right nutrients in it to start the next pile. But you don't want to use much more than about 50%. You want to mix it in with some new carbon as you reuse it onto your pile. So the reason to get in it and open it up is to see if it's finished, and it should be very nice and fine, and should be a darker, quite uniform material when it's finished. But if you don't have land to apply it to, you can just keep adding to it as it breaks down and just use it for your dead animals. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sure. So the rest of you must not have any dead animals. I mean, maybe nobody knows, maybe they sell them before they die, so that's a good thing. I didn't think I would have any, but every year there's at least 2 or 3, it seems like, that just go away for some reason. I thought it was interesting that you're allowed to, as long as there's not a disease, to keep the hide off the animal. I guess that wouldn't be any worse than skinning out a deer or anything else, but you would definitely not want to leave it too long. Also, when we did our training at Langston for this topic, they suggested on large animals that you also lance open any large muscles. So on a cow or a bull or a horse, anything like that, they would suggest that any of the bigger muscle masses, probably on the hips and the upper legs, that you would lance open those muscles to help it break down faster, because the hide is pretty thick on a cow, and it will take longer, especially if you have just a static pile. If you're a bigger operation, there's a lot more rules to all this, and you will have a roof over it, and you will have a concrete floor, and you will have 3 divided bins. And they would prefer you have gates or some kind of a closure on the front of each of those bins. But what you do is you start in the first bin. After about 150 days, then you can turn it and move it to the next bin and add more wood chips. And then after 2 to 3 more months, then you can put more of that in the third bin and just keep adding carbon material. And the roof on a unit like that, you could just, for like this unit that I'm showing right here with the hay bales, you could just stretch a tarp over that if you know you're getting a little bit too much water on it from rainfall. If it starts to smell bad, just tarp it, and that will, and then add some more carbon on top, some more straw or hay, and that will help that smell go away. Plus it will, when it'll stop the water from just falling in there and making it anaerobic or aerobic. Yeah, sorry. Whichever one stinks really bad. Well,
I guess, is there any more questions? I don't have any questions. I haven't seen any questions. I guess, is there any other questions, not necessarily related to this topic, but any of the stuff that we might have, any
Talked about in the
questions
past.
just related to sheep and goat production?
Yes, Susan, this is Jeff. I have a question. What
Sure.
have you found to be your best way to control predators?
Lots of electricity. I use electronetting, but I'm in an area where I don't get a whole lot of pressure from coyotes. I haven't passed through my property, but they know that the sheep are in electronetting, and as long as it's in good repair, it stays about 8,000 volts. It seems to be the best deterrent. I have had them. I've had 2 coyote attacks, and the fence was off on one time, and the other time, and I had put it over a wildlife trail. So basically, I put my netting over that wildlife trail, so the coyotes and the deer, that was their place where they walked on the backside of this property, and the fence was off, and it got in there and got a lamb. And then another time, there was a break in the fence, like 1 or 2 strands had been broken, and I hadn't seen them, and that lamb must have been laying right by the fence, and he just reached in and grabbed it, and probably didn't feel enough electricity until after he pulled it through. So but good electric fences are very important. And I keep a donkey as my main livestock guardian animal, and she does a good job with dogs, and I have more problems with people. So she will stand between the people and the sheep. So, which is helpful because then the sheep don't come over to the fence. But yeah, so good electric fences, good guardian animals.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And Jeff, where are you? Are you in New Mexico?
No, I'm down in northern Wright County, so south of Lebanon, about 30 miles.
Okay.
Near Hartville.
Okay. Electric, you can't go wrong with electric fences, and you need high voltage and low impedance. So,
Yeah.
no matter where you fix them, make sure it's that. Nothing in, nothing out.
And is that on like a solar charger, or is that like 110 volt out of the barn?
That's a solar charger. So,
Okay.
yeah, if you put them in right, put your fence in right, and keep the grass stomped down, they'll stay pretty hot.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. What else does anybody want to talk about? You don't have to talk about death all night. We have a few more minutes.
Let me see. What do I have questions about?
how's everybody's marketing going? What do you sell? Do you sell meat? Do you sell wool? Do you sell products?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the farm ready for it. So I don't have any experience at that. I did just read the chat. If I could ask a question. Eric recommended Anatolian Shepherd Great Pyrenees mixes. Does anybody know where those dogs could be had?
Yeah, check on Facebook get into your whatever breed you're planning on buying. If it's a hair sheep, there's hair sheep of Missouri on Facebook. Let's see, and then there's small ruminants page. There's just look up anything sheep and goats. Sheep and Goats of Missouri, I think, is another Facebook page. And a lot of people have their dogs listed on there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And buy from somebody who actually keeps sheep and goats and has their dogs in a working farm, so that you get good genetics and good brains with those dogs. Because and your breeds, check your breeds and know which ones are wanderers and which ones are just going to kill everything that they can kill. There's some pretty serious research about guardian livestock dogs. So kind of read up on it and see what's going to work for you. And some of them like to wander because if they have gotten rid of all the danger on the farm, then they start scouting out further and further away from your area. And that could cause problems with your neighbors. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Also, you don't forget, you got to feed your dog, no matter what kind of a dog it is. Got to have a way to feed it so that the sheep and goats don't get into it. And there's all kinds of contraptions and feeders for that, but you'll probably have to have another cage just for the dog food.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Eric mentioned something here about, has anyone used an online vet and time of the day when problems occur? I've never heard of that before. I don't know, Susan, if you want to comment on that or not. Most of the vets I've ever worked with, they usually are obviously
yeah, most of them want to come out and look.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can find one that does do that online and you can use your phone to show them video or camera pictures or whatever, that might work. And I don't know, maybe some of the universities are offering that now. You'd have to check. I don't know.
Yeah, this is Eric. So I've seen, it usually turns up when I'm trying to research a problem, you know, like I'm trying to type in symptoms and I'll see a reference for like a online veterinarian where, you know, they charge you like, you know, $15, $20 for the consult basically. And, you know, because my problems, you know, it's always 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday night and, you know, you're not going to be able to get the vet till Monday.
Yeah.
And so I've never done it, you know, I usually just muddle through, but I'm kind of debating on trying it sometime.
Well, and where are you located, Eric?
Diamond, Missouri. And so
Okay.
I've got, pretty good vets around, but, sometimes, like I said, getting hold of them after hours doesn't work too well.
Yeah. David Middleton is, he also works for Lincoln University, and he has a lot of sheep, goats. He's got hogs, chickens, everything. He's got cattle. And he works for Lincoln just like I do. And he's down in Mount Vernon. So I could get you his number, or you can look on the Lincoln website under the Innovative Small Farmers Outreach Program and find David Middleton, and he could help you down there. So he wouldn't be a veterinarian, but he's raised a lot of livestock in his day. And you can also contact me and I'll give you his number.
Well, Susan,
Yes.
I did find a Facebook page that I've been kind of using. It's called Successful Goating with Rosie. And it is really has a lot of great information, and you can I did send in a picture one time of my goat, a couple questions about it, and people were kind of responding, and some of them were there was actually a vet who responded too on this page. So it was just it's been an interesting Facebook page, and I've learned a lot off of it too. So I wanted to put it out there. Maybe other people have seen it too.
Well, and just be careful and, realize that if it's not a veterinarian or not somebody who has a lot of expertise in this, they're winging it too, just like, we all do this, but check and make sure you're getting the right answers, because things can go wrong.
No, it is true, Susan, and I do think about that too. But working with large animals for many years, it never fails. When something's going to happen, it's overnight.
Yeah.
Never fails.
Yeah. And the more prevention that we can do, the better off we are. And, preventing problems. I know that sounds obvious, but how many times do we do silly things that, just cause more of a problem? It's the same. It's like with minerals to me. If you're not putting out a super high quality mineral, then your disease problems are going to be higher. Your foot problems are going to be higher. If you're feeding a lot of grain, you're growing out a lot of hoof material. I get good horns without any added protein from grain. And but I think that is due to the high quality forage plus great minerals that they get. So, if we would do some prevention, like spending a little money in the prevention end of it with minerals and things like that, then we wouldn't have so many disease issues and, things like that. So I got tired of trimming feet, so I gave up feeding grain a long time ago.
Well, I just want to say that I have learned a lot from the Zoom meetings. And if I could reference anything, because, I'm still learning, I would love to have something on actual, like I'm trying to grow my medicine cabinet per se for goats. It's totally different for cattle and horses. So, and there's so much out there. I question, like,
Yeah.
which product kind of drives me crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many out there that it does get kind of maddening after a while because, what's the right thing for this? And, but here again, prevention is a good thing, but that would be a really good topic to do another series on.
Well, I know I would love it.
Okay. Well, I've been looking into growing a medicine wall. So I think that's going to be a cool thing to do. Wherever I would be, it's a medicine wall is basically all the high tannin type plants, walnut and what's some of the other ones? Elm saplings and different things like that. Anything with high tannins in it, if you grow it specifically for your animal so that they have a place to go and eat that and select that nutrient, many times they can, they're balancing out their nutrition that way, and they can help themselves, stop being sick or not have a bellyache or whatever the problem is. Sometimes they just are missing some nutrients. So
Right.
that could be an interesting topic. But yeah, medicine chest or a medicinal wall, we could have a whole series on that.
It's true. Anyway, thank you.
Sure.
Well, is there anything else before we end for this evening?
Paul, I would like to say something.
Okay.
I'm from Kansas originally, so I've really been availing myself of all the MU extension stuff, and I went to the advanced grazing school here a week ago, and these Zoom meetings are just wonderful. All of the presenters have just been such a wealth of practical information, so I just wanted to give kudos to you all. I've just found all of these to be quite helpful, and I really appreciate you all doing it after hours so that it makes it a lot more possible to be a part of them. So just want to thank you all for your time and work.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
That's a nice way to end the night.
Exactly.
Well, again, thank you all for being on this evening and being in this workshop series. And probably here in a couple months or so, we'll probably put something together again like this. As I said, there's an evaluation in that email I sent out this afternoon. There's an evaluation link in there. There's also a link to the YouTube video for last week's presentation. And please fill out that evaluation. Of course, if you have any questions or anything, you can always contact us. More than happy to help. That's about all I've got. There's Susan's contact information there. But with that, thank you all. And if you need anything, just let us know.